guys, welcome to another edition of the Bridge HC Online. I am the lead pastor for the Bridge, Larry Vinson. So glad that you could join us today as we continue in our third week of our series called Band-Aid Solutions, where we take the topics that culture and the church refuse to talk about in a real, in-depth, tangible way, and we tackle them head on with biblical solutions. And today is a topic that means a lot to me personally as a person who struggles with PTSD and has quite a few mental health struggles. Today I want to talk about the solution to mental health, or at least the first step to helping us when we have our mental health struggles, because we tend to sweep mental health under the rug. You know, in the military, I have talked to a ton of veterans, fellow veterans, and people in the service currently who always talk about this fear of getting mental health help because it will hinder them or bar them from having the promotion that they want or going further in their career, especially if they're trying to stay in for the full 20. You know, it's hard for soldiers to get over this stigma of wanting to get help because they don't want to be held back by a mental health diagnosis. And in the church it's not any different. If you talk about having a mental health struggle, people will say that it's a problem of faith. And what's the last thing that a pastor should have? And that's a problem of faith. And even though I disagree that this is a faith issue, I think over the last 5 years, over the last 5 years of being diagnosed with PTSD and being public about this, I have shown that my faith has thrived, if not survived, because of me being open and honest with my mental health struggles. But there are people in the church who believe, and I've heard them all, that if you have a mental health struggle, that you don't have enough faith. That if you have, if you claim to have a mental health problem, you're deceiving yourself because mental health problems don't exist, or mental health struggles don't exist, right? I've heard of them all, and yet we don't deal with these things properly. Even at home, there's this stigma that if I start talking about my mental health struggles, it will not only make myself uncomfortable, but it will make my family uncomfortable to talk about. And then a lot of people have been afraid, and I've been guilty of this, that once I open Pandora's box, there's no closing it, right? It becomes more of a mess the more we talk about our mental health with those that we love. Well, I want to dispel those rumors today. I want to dispel these myths, right? And I want to talk about the first step that we should take in helping our mental health struggles. Now, as we talk about, the real solution to mental health, we're going to cover this in three different ways over the course of three different sections. In our first section today, we're going to be talking about the reality of mental health struggles. That they do exist, and that this is something that we should deal with, and the Bible does have something to say about it, right? We'll talk about that in the second section, and then in the second section, we'll continue on by talking about what the proper response should be, both from us as individuals struggling with mental health, and then also from God. What does God say about mental health struggles, and how does He respond when we, as a faithful follower, go through mental health struggles, right? So we're going to talk about that in the second section. And then finally, in our third section, we'll talk about this first step. Not the solution, but the first step in overcoming our mental health struggles. So that's how we're covered today. Let's jump right in by talking about this first section that we're calling The Struggle is Real. Now, I want to introduce this topic by showing you a story that we often don't equate to mental health struggles, okay? And The story is found in 1 Kings 19. Now, to understand what's going on in 1 Kings 19, we have to understand what happened in 1 Kings 18, right? In 1 Kings 18, you have this prophet by the name of Elijah who meets a bunch of other prophets who believe in a different god named Baal and challenges them to a god-off, right? Which God is real? That's basically the question that he is proposing to them. And in order to prove which God is real, they put a test up about which one can do this miracle. Okay, and the miracle is simple. Here is an altar. Here's a sacrifice. Without any help from you or any of his human followers, your God has to be able to light this sacrifice on fire. And if you and the first God to do so, or the only God to do so, will be declared the real God. Now, the prophets of Baal, they try, they dance, they do all these things. They even cut themselves, right, to try to bring upon their God's fire, right, to no avail. And if you ever want to hear some funny slams of a false god, read 1 Kings 18, because Elijah tears Baal down, even going as far as saying, "Oh, he must be in the bathroom. Give him some more time." Right? It's just a funny bunch of slams. But then Elijah has his turn, and through a course of a lot of events, he douses the thing in the sacrifice in water. He fills a moat up around it with water. I mean, the thing is just drenched. And then he prays, and lo and behold, literal fire shoots down from heaven and disintegrates this sacrifice and dries up every piece of water, right? And so Elijah is declared the victor. God is declared the real God, and he is on this mountaintop experience, both literal and spiritual and emotional and mental. Now, all of this happens in 1 Kings 18, okay? Right after this is where we're starting our text today. 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 1. Here's what happens. Now, Ahab told Jezebel. Ahab was the king at the time. Jezebel was the queen. Jezebel was the one wearing the pants in that family. She was the one really in charge. Ahab was just a figurehead, right? So Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them." Now Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, and while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, he came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. Now, Elijah had a very successful ministry. And not just through 1 Kings 18, but through his entire ministry. The entire thing had been successful. But it only took one major negative event to destroy his mental confidence. Both confidence in himself and confidence in God. By the time we get to 1 Kings 19, Elijah is tired. He is tired of the ups and downs of ministry. He's tired of the ups and downs of life. He's tired of having success one day and life-altering depression the next. And to a degree, and this is my opinion, but to a degree, he blamed himself for Jezebel's response. Now, in his mind, albeit this is his mind, he thinks that had he been better, had he been more convincing, had he been able to prove even more without a shadow of a doubt that God was real and had that rippled into the entire kingdom, then Jezebel wouldn't be doing this. She wouldn't be as bold. She would have been defeated. I believe that Elijah believed that after the fire at Mount Carmel in 1 Kings 18, that there would have been no way that anything bad could ever happen again. He blamed himself for Jezebel's issues. And he was afraid, which absolutely makes no sense. Because God literally brought fire from heaven the day before. And if God did that, he could literally do anything. But this is what mental health struggles do to us. Fear turns into depression. Fear turns into a lack of internal confidence that leads us to depression, where we start thinking that we're not good enough. We can't even take something like what God does, bringing something literal, fire from heaven, and turning it into an effective ministry plan. And Elijah thinks, man, if I can't even do this, I can't do anything. I'm no better than any of the other prophets that have died before me. I'm a failure. One fear turns into a lack of confidence that turns into depression. And for Elijah and so many of us, that deep depression led to a desire to end his own life. Folks, mental health struggles can happen literally at any moment to anyone. I don't care how successful you are in life. I don't care how successful your family is. I don't care how well put together you are. I don't care how much money you have. Mental health struggles can happen to anyone at any time. Elijah had a successful ministry, and the literal next day, he wants to commit suicide. And we're going to hear this from Elijah again and again as we go through the rest of our text, that he believes that he's all alone. Mental health struggles are devastatingly isolating and lonely. Elijah left his servant and went on his own to this journey and got to this bush and is like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. I got nobody. I got no friends. I got no family. I got no other prophets that I can rely on or talk to. I might as well just die. This was a real feeling. It's not just some fake made up thing. This isn't because Elijah was just, being a drama king or anything like that. It was he wasn't doing any of this. This was a guttural response that so many of us have when responding to our mental health struggles. Because mental health struggles create these guttural responses, these things from within our core, these cries from the depths of our souls, responding to our emotions and the circumstances that we meet ourselves in, or we find ourselves in. Mental health is real. It can happen to anybody. It purposely is isolating, devastatingly so. It is simply just a response from our guts to the things going on within ourselves and outside of ourselves. Now we're going to get into the hope and the positive results of, these dark moments in life. But right now, I just want to sit in this darkness and in this reality of mental health struggle. And I want you to think about these things as we head into our first set of discussion questions. They're going to pop up on the screen. If you're new with us here, welcome. I'm so glad that you are here. The questions are going to pop up on the screen. You're going to want to press pause. And if you're with a group, you're going to want to discuss these things within 10 to 15 minutes or anything else really that comes to your mind or heart. And if you're by yourself, don't just let this video play on through. Push pause and take the time to reflect on what you've just heard. Maybe even write down your thoughts to these questions or thoughts to anything that you've heard so far. And when you're done, come on back, push play, and we will continue on with our second section. Hey guys, welcome back. Mental health struggles are real. And anybody, and I mean anybody, I don't care if it's a pastor or if it's a faithful Christian in your life or if it's a boss or, whomever. Anyone who says that mental health struggles are not real are stupid. And they're lying to themselves. Because mental health struggles are real. They have a real impact and they are devastating. So much so that I believe that the church can no longer ignore the struggles that their congregations are going through. 5 years ago, I came out publicly about my mental health struggles, specifically about my PTSD diagnosis. My wife and I thought that it would be a great idea. Now, I've gotten a lot of good responses from the churches that I've been a part of and the churches that I've interacted with and things like that, and mostly they've been about, they've come from a place of love and care from those who love and care about me and my family. And those have continued on. I have great friendships and I have great people in my life who constantly check up on me to make sure that I'm doing okay. And when I'm not, they're there. They're right there next to me, making sure that I can get pulled out of the darkness and brought back into the light. But there's been some negative responses as well from people inside of the church and people without outside of the church. There have been people who have denied that I have mental health struggles. I had one person tell me, "You don't have PTSD. You're just going through a sad time." There were some people who told me that my faith wasn't good enough. That this was really a disconnect between me and God. One person actually said that the apostles didn't have PTSD because their faith was too strong, implying that my weakness of faith was the reason that I was going through PTSD in the first place. Others said that if I simply just prayed about it hard enough, that I would be quickly healed. And when I was getting my service dog a year and a half later, they asked, "You're still going through that?" All of this is based upon ignorance. People who don't want to know, don't care to know, and don't want to face the struggles, the real hard struggles that mental health can create. So we've had good responses and we've had bad responses, but the question is, what is the proper response? How should we respond to our mental health struggles, and how does God himself respond to our mental health struggles? Well, I want to discover this answer together by continuing to read from our text. 1 Kings chapter 19, and we're going to continue in verse 5. Here's what God says to Elijah, or actually, here's what the author of Kings writes us. He says, "All at once, an angel touched him and said, 'Get up and eat.' He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. Look, God does not ignore our mental health struggles. Matter of fact, he provides for our needs and takes care of us. Elijah could only sleep. That's what he needed to do. That's what he had to do. That was what he was able to do. And can I just say, for those of us struggling with mental health, that sometimes all we can do is sleep. And I know that people who don't get it will try to explain to you the negative impacts of that and things like that, and I get that. And we shouldn't do it every day, but sometimes if all you can do is the bare minimum, then be blessed. If all you can do is what Elijah did, and that's sleep and eat, then sleep and eat. And just listen to what you need in that moment. I'm not saying forsake any help. I'm not saying don't go to your therapist. I'm not saying don't take your medication. I'm not saying any of that. But if that's all you can do, then at least do that. Because while Elijah could only sleep, God could provide so much more. And he did. He brought food to Elijah and woke him up and made him eat, or at least offered him food. Right? Because while God does not ignore our mental health struggles, he does want us to willingly partake in the things that he provides. God didn't force that piece of bread down Elijah's throat. He didn't open up Elijah's mouth and pour the water down it. No, he offered it. He put it there beside him. He woke him up and said, "Here, eat." But it was up to Elijah to actually take the food and to pick up the drink and to partake. Sometimes God will provide for us, or at least all the time, God will provide for us, but it takes us to actually reach out our hands so that we can partake in what he gives us. We need to willingly partake in God's provisions. True, we can only do what our strength allows us, but God will only give us what we are able to partake in. And if we do that, God will be patiently nurturing us throughout our struggle. This is what he does with Elijah. This is what I love about Elijah. It's such an intimate way to do things. It just shows how much God cares for Elijah and how he cares for us, because God could have done a lot of things. God could have just instantaneously woken Elijah up. Like, he could have done that. God could have screamed and said, "Wake up, Elijah!" But he didn't do that. God could have flipped him over and made him wake up and just carelessly, opened the eyes of Elijah. But God didn't do that. The scripture tells us that the angel touched Elijah. I read that as a sign of comfort. Didn't shake him awake, didn't startle him awake. He touched him. And he woke him up compassionately. See, God knows what we need. And he knows what it takes for us. He knows what it takes for us to get through the darkness that our mental health struggles cause. And he is going to do what is needed for us to overcome. As long as we partake in it, we'll be okay. God's response is so important to our theology. Because so many times when we go through our mental health struggles, we don't believe that God is there. We don't believe that he cares. But he does. He is there. He's always there. And he's always providing for us to help us where we're at to simply move forward. And all we need to do is to accept the help. And if we can do that, then we can start moving forward. Think about that as we head into our second section of questions. Take about 10 to 15 minutes to go through these, and then when you're done, come on back, and we will start our third and final section. Hey guys, welcome back. So, God is involved in our mental health struggles. He's there. You know, we believe that God is always there. There's this theological term that says that God is omnipresent, which means he is all places all at once. And yet, we take that step further by saying not only is God always there, but God is always caring. He is always there to offer help to those who need it. We have to believe that that means even in the midst of our mental health struggles. Because God wants to be involved. He is involved in a positive and nurturing way, like we just learned through the story of Elijah. You know, when I first was diagnosed with my PTSD, I went through a very dark time, and it wouldn't be the only dark time that I went through, and wouldn't be the worst of the dark times that I went through. But it was a really dark time. And God and I were arguing about a lot of things, or at least I was the one arguing with God. And I remember the first time that I had hope. The first time that I realized that God had placed a tribe around me, a bunch of people to support me and to love me and to walk me through this dark time. And I remember on that Sunday morning, I come into church and I sit in the front row. I don't know if I was preaching that day or if I was doing something else that day, but I was in the front row. And my friend was on stage leading worship. And I remember this song being sang. I don't remember what song it was. It doesn't matter what song it was. But I remember this song being played. And I remember singing along with this song. And I remember this hope just washing over me. And I remember I closed my eyes and I lifted my arm up. And I spent some time truly praising God. And letting his love just be felt in my soul. And I remember that I knew at that moment for the first time in a while that everything was going to be okay. You see, God had been involved the entire time, but it wasn't until I was really willing to accept it that it became real. And that hope was the first step for me in being able to solve my mental health struggles that I'm still working on today. So it leads me to this question that I want us to explore together. What is the first step for solving our mental health struggles? I believe the answer is found in the rest of our story. So let's get right into it. 1 Kings chapter 19, continuing on in verse 9, here's what is written. And the word of the Lord came to him. What are you doing here, Elijah? He replied, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. And then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too." The Lord said to him, "Go back the way you came, and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael king over Aram. Also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel. And anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Abel Meholah, to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death any who escaped the sword of Hazael. And Elisha will put to death any who escaped the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal and whose mouths have not kissed him." Elijah teaches us a lot of things here. Mainly that mental health struggles do not end with the crises. Because Elijah needed more than a good meal and rest. Yes, he needed that rest. Yes, he needed those meals. And it did give him strength to move forward and to travel for 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb. But that struggle didn't stop there. It's interesting to me when I read this text that God did not call Elijah to Mount Horeb. He did not call him to meet him at this mountain. No, that was Elijah's doing. Elijah got what he needed from God to physically move forward, to mentally move forward, to emotionally move forward. But moving forward does not mean moving on. No, Elijah needed answers from God, and so he went to God. And so let me ask you, what's your Mount Horeb? Where is the place that you can go where you can get answers from God? Maybe it's the woods. Maybe it's nature. Now, it's not me. I am not a nature guy, and I don't get how people can have moments with God in nature. I don't, right? But I know so many people who do. For me, it's monasteries, right? It's getting away, from my community, from my culture, and yet being a place where I know there's a community I can lean on, that I can worship with, that I can even fellowship with, but then also have time where I can be alone with God in my room or in the sanctuary or wherever. Those are the moments where I get the best time with God. Where is your Mount Horeb? Because we all have these places that we need to go to get our answers from God. That's what Elijah did. Because mental health struggles do not end with the crisis. It doesn't end when we're in the depth of our depression, unable to get out of bed. And it doesn't end when we're able to finally get out of bed and to start eating again and to start going back to work and to start visiting with our friends. Those moments are good for us, and then we need to achieve those moments. But our mental health struggles may still exist long after the depression or the episode ends. There has to come a time where we get away and we get with God. That's what Elijah needed. Elijah gets with God, and when he gets with God, he is honest with God. He was honest with his words and his emotions because God asked him, "What are you doing here?" And Elijah said the exact same thing both times. He said, I am a passionate servant of God. I have done nothing but been faithful to you. And yet, even after all of this, my life is not any better. I'm still running for my life. I'm still worried about death. I'm still looking over my shoulder. I do not have peace. I do not have these things that I should have because I'm a faithful servant of you. I need to be honest with you, God. And I can hear the frustration. I can hear the anger. I can even hear the sadness. Elijah is done. And even though he's moving forward, he needs more than what he has. And he needs God to deliver that. And so how God responds here is vastly important. Because while God responded very well in the midst of his depression, in the worst of his moments, by patiently nurturing Elijah, there's still more work to be done. And I think that if you are a friend of a person struggling with mental health, that how God responds next is something that we all can learn from. Because a lot of us, when we see our friends going through mental health struggles, at the midst of their darkest moments, we are right there. We are giving them the blankets. We are helping them with water. We are giving them food. We are checking in on them every single day. We're sending the texts out. We're coming to the house. Yada, 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 yada. But we believe oftentimes that our job is done when the crisis ends. Not true. Because what God does is what we should all do. Because while Elijah was honest with God, God was also honest with Elijah, but in a compassionate way. You see, God will always do what is best for us, and that includes saying what is best for us and calling us to the thing that is best for us, especially after a mental health struggle. You see, God was compassionate with Elijah. He spoke quietly to Elijah. He whispered to Elijah. And a lot of people when they look at this text and they look at the whispering event, they say it was a way of testing Elijah's faithfulness. Is Elijah going to see God through the earthquake? Is he going to see him through the storm? Or is he going to see him as he came through a gentle whisper? I don't think that's what this was at all. Elijah was friendly with God. He knew God. He knew how God was going to show up. He knew what to look for. He knew what to listen for. I don't think this was a test. I think this was done as another sign of comfort. Again, think about this. The angel touched Elijah. God told the angel to do that. That wasn't the angel's doing. It wasn't like, the angel doing it of his own accord. I'm sure the angel could have. But I believe that God said to the angel, go and show yourself in a comforting way. Touch Elijah. Wake him up gently. And the angel did that. And God whispering is another sign of comfort for Elijah. I'm not mad. I'm not angry with you. I'm not upset with you. I'm not distant from you. I'm right here, Elijah. And I'm willing to listen. My heart is still, but it's open. Come talk to me. Come talk to me. And when he hears Elijah, God again does what is best for us, for Elijah. But it's something that we can learn to. He lets Elijah's request be answered. Or, well, in a way, right? Obviously, he doesn't allow Elijah to die, although Elijah will die here soon after, right? By being called up in a chariot of fire, which, by the way, God, if you're listening, that's how I would love to go. But he says, look, I see you're done. I know you're done. So let's go ahead and be done. And so he ends Elijah's ministry. And ending his ministry was not a punishment. It was not God saying, look, you screwed up, you're done. No, it wasn't that at all. This was God's loving response to a servant who can give no more. And can I just be honest with you? There are moments where it's okay to end something because you have nothing more to give, because the struggle is too much or the struggle was too much. It's okay to say, you know what? I've done what I can do. I've got nothing else to give. I've got to step away. That's what he did with Elijah, and that's what he could do for any one of us. But he will only do it if it's what we need. And if it's what's going to make us better. And to not only move forward, but to move on. Now, God does one more thing here, and he does it in a loving way, and it's a subtle way. You may not have noticed it, but God does correct Elijah here. There was one thing that God had a problem with, and that's when Elijah said that there is nobody else here who doesn't, there's nobody else here who understands what I'm going through. God corrected that. And he says, look, there are 7,000 others of you. And God doesn't say this just to say, that my religion isn't dead. He doesn't say that as a self-gratifying kind of answer. He says this as a way to comfort Elijah that he's not as alone as he thinks. As a matter of fact, he's not alone at all. There are 7,000 other people out in the world around him that have yet to bow their knee to Baal or kiss his hand. And guys, listen. If you are in your mental health struggle right now and you think you are alone, I am here to tell you that you are not. You never have been and you never will be. There are other people in the world around you who are struggling with the same mental health issues that you are. You're not alone. So now that you have this information, what do you need to do with it? What needs to be done? Well, I am under the impression, and I'm one to think, that when it comes to mental health struggles, honesty is the best policy. And that looks like a couple of different things from us. They're up there on the screen right now, and I want to go through each of them with you. Number one, if I'm going to be honest with God, I need to first seek out God. Go and find that place. Find your Mount Horeb. Find the place where you can get with God and you can focus on God and you can ask the tough questions of God. And when you do, honestly listen for him. Listen for his voice. Listen for that voice of compassion, not that voice of self-doubt, not that voice of self-deprecation, but that voice of compassion. That voice that can only come from God with love and care and nurturing. And let me encourage you, take as much time as is needed. Do not rush this. Take the time that you need to focus on God and to hear for him. And when you do hear him, because you will hear him, listen to him. His answer may not be what you want, but it will always be what you need. And it will help you not only to move forward, it will help you move on. This is where I want us to end for our time together, and I want us to lead into our third set of discussion questions. So go ahead and take the time to answer these questions, and when you're done, come on back. I want to wrap things up relatively quickly. Hey guys, welcome back. You know, when it comes to mental health, honesty is the best policy. I made my mental health struggle public, and Heather and I came together to do that, not for the attention, which I've been accused of. Not because I wanted people to look, and to look like a wounded animal. I didn't want that. I did it for the accountability. I did it for the opportunity to minister and to be ministered to. Because I believe that if I started talking about this, that others would start talking about their struggle as well, their pain as well. And it would be a benefit not only to me and to my family, but to those around me. You know, God's correction to Elijah was to tell him that he was not alone. And can I tell you that if you're experiencing a mental health struggle, you're not alone either. You have people who care about you, people who want to be with you, people who want to help you. And at the top of that list is God himself. Which leads me to the one thing that I want you to think about, the one thing I want you to talk about, the one thing I want you to discuss with those that you care about, and and to pray about with God, and to study the Scripture with. Here it is. God cares about your mental health. Always has, always will. If you leave with no other truth today, leave with that truth. God will always care about your mental health. I just want to encourage you in that. Because he cares, you're not alone. God cares enough about your mental health to be patient with you and to nurture you, to be compassionate with you, to be honest with you, and to surround you with a loving community that will never let you go. And so if you're sitting here today and you're listening to all of this and you are experiencing a mental health struggle and you are all alone in that, you can come to us for support. You can come to us for a community. You can reach out to us. Find us on our social medias. Find us through email. Find us through our website. Or come to a Tuesday night. We meet each and every Tuesday night at 6:30 at Tri-West Middle School in Lizton, Indiana, from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And when you come, you will find a non-judgmental community who will love you as you are. You will find friendships that go far beyond any other relationship that you might have. What you'll find is support. And I know it might be difficult for you to come on a Tuesday night, or you may feel uncomfortable coming around a bunch of strangers and discussing these topics. I get that. So come online. Every Tuesday night at about 6:50, right before we start our conversation, we jump on Zoom and we live stream the conversation. Now, we live stream my preaching, and then we break into groups for the discussion time, and there is a person online who is ready to go, leading the conversation with the online crowd. And if you don't want to be a part of that, you just mute your microphone and you turn off your camera and you don't participate. And that's okay. I get it. It's fine. But just show up. Try us out. Get to know our people. And you will find that community that you've been looking for. I'm so grateful that you guys joined us today. We will be back next week as we talk about the Band-Aid Solutions series, and we continue with the topic of politics, which I'm sure won't be divisive at all, right? All right, so come on back next week. I can't wait to see you. But until then, as always, peace, love, and soul.